Let's talk about the new Pet Sematary. Spoilers. So this movie is really great, and you can tell from the first few seconds because it starts in the most original way possible with a shot of a forest. And then it gets even more original because there's a road through the forest and there's a car driving on the road and it's all shot by a drone, and it's just so groundbreaking that I can't even take it because no other movie has ever started like this. And then we learn that there's a family in the car and they are the sweetest family that ever lived. No, seriously, everybody in the cinema now has diabetes after watching them. There's the dad, his name is Louis, and there's the mom, her name is Rachel, and then there's the daughter, whose name is Ellie, and then there's the 2-year-old boy, whose name is Gage, and they are all a very happy and sweet family. And there's also Ellie's cat, whose name is Churchill, or Church, and he's the most adorable cat in the world. Seriously, he is so cute, he is the best. And they're driving along and Ellie's like, oh my god, there's so many trees. Yes, child, you are driving through a forest. What did you expect to see? A lot of lobsters? And then they do their happy family banter, where, for example, Louis tries to tell a joke, and the joke is that he tells Ellie they haven't arrived yet, but actually they've arrived. It's hilarious. And then we learn that this family, who have 2 small children and a pet, have, by choice, decided to live in a house that is completely, utterly unfriendly to children and pets and super dangerous because it's right next to a road where massive trucks fly all the time at like 2,000 miles per hour, and on the other side there's a creepy forest which I would be worried the children might get lost in even if there wasn't anything creepy and supernatural in it. But it's all good because they're there to slow down and spend more time with each other. And I really love it when families need to move in the middle of nowhere in order to be forced to spend time with each other because you know there's absolutely nothing else to do, because that's the only way that works. You can't just spend time with each other if you're living in Boston, which is where they used to live. So Rachel and Ellie witness this creepy sort of funeral procession of kids in scary animal masks who are burying a dog in a cemetery for pets in the woods. And just like with most horror movies, the creepy shots that are used in the trailer and like the posters and everything actually have very little to do with the plot because we never see these children in their creepy masks again. And then they meet their neighbor, who's this stereotypical old guy, and it seems like he kind of can't decide if he's shady or he's friendly and nice. And he kind of forms a bond with Ellie and the cat because, let's face it, who wouldn't form a bond with the cat? Church is absolutely adorable. He is the best. And Ellie, I guess he forms a bond with her because she dances around the house in her ballerina outfit to the sound of the Sugar Plum Fairy because she has no real personality traits otherwise. Meanwhile, Louis is a doctor, so he goes to work and this random black guy who was hit by a car gets brought in, and it's so cool that this movie decided to include a black guy who totally does not feel like he's only there so that the movie can say there's a black guy in our movie. It totally doesn't feel like that at all. And then the black guy dies and immediately becomes a ghost and starts kind of good-naturedly haunting Louis and trying to warn him that bad things are gonna happen, but it's not very clear why he's doing that. I guess he's just bored because it must really suck to be a ghost in a small town where there's not even anywhere interesting to haunt and like nothing to do. So I guess he's just bored, so he decides to stick with this guy and tell him things. At some point, Ellie asks a question about death and heaven, and Rachel is like, oh yes honey, of course, when you die you go to heaven. And Louis is like, no dude, that's bullshit. And Rachel is super surprised that he doesn't believe in heaven, because this is totally not a conversation you have with your significant other before the two of you have a couple of children, one of whom is about 10 years old, I think. But the thing is, Rachel is really uncomfortable with death, because she used to have this sister who was very ill and like crippled and disfigured and disabled, and her parents left Rachel alone with her sister all the time, and she was really scared of her. So one day they left her alone with her sister and she had to feed her, but she didn't want to go up the stairs and bring her food into her room because she was scared. So instead she used one of those elevator thingies that people have in their walls, even though she wasn't supposed to use it. And then her sister died falling down the elevator thingy, and it was all Rachel's fault. But how? How do you fall down that thing? Like, especially if you're the size of like an older girl, like a teenager, even if you're weak and ill and disfigured, I feel like you'd have to try pretty hard to actually like fall down. Couldn't she just like take the plate and take it out? Did she have to like go all the way there? I don't know how that works. And we're never shown. I also don't know if the ghost of Rachel's sister, which Rachel sees in like hallucinations and stuff, I don't know if that's supposed to be a real ghost or if that's an imaginary ghost and it's only the black guy ghost that's the real ghost. Is there really enough space in the same movie for a fake ghost, a real ghost and zombies? I don't know. Anyway, on Halloween, Church gets hit by a truck because it was just a matter of time, and seriously, this family are really irresponsible pet owners, especially considering they were told that this happens all the time. And the parents don't really want to tell Ellie, so they kind of tell her he's just run away, and Louis and the neighbor go in the dead of night into the forest to bury the cat. Because this makes perfect sense, because it takes two grown men to bury a cat, and the neighbor totally couldn't have just done that while Louis was trick-or-treating with his daughter, if he was gonna help anyway. Okay, so it's in the middle of the night and they go to the pet cemetery in the woods, but then the neighbor's like, no, wait, we're not gonna bury him in here, follow me. And then they go over this wall of wood and sticks and mud and stuff, and then they traipse through the woods for like an hour, and Louis doesn't ask any questions. And then they hear a T-Rex in the woods. Ah! Or something. No, seriously, it's like either a T-Rex or random stock monsters sound number 3. But while I was watching, I was like really excited about the idea of some like prehistoric person having a pet T-Rex and burying them in the cemetery, and now the T-Rex has come back to life. But yeah, random monster sounds, and still Louis is just following his neighbor along, like far away. I don't know how long it's been at this point, and they get to this weird place that apparently not many people know about, even though it's like super freaking obvious and people would have gone into the woods before. And you could definitely notice it from an airplane, because from above it looks like a strange kind of symbol. It's pretty noticeable. But anyway, they bury the cat in there, and at this point this is like way too much effort to bury a cat. But Louis still hasn't caught on to what's going on. So he just goes back home and he's like, well, you know, my job is done. So it's the next day and Church comes back, but he's different. No, wait, he's not. He's exactly the same, and he's still a really, really adorable cat. I mean, I think he's supposed to look angry, but he looks less disgruntled than my own cat on her best days. And like after Ellie spends like 5 minutes savagely pulling at his fur, he kind of scratches her a little bit. Evil. Evil, I tell you. Non-demonic cats never do that. And there isn't any like bad smell like there is in the book, or if there is, they mention it so quickly that I completely missed it. So yeah, he's a pretty normal cat still, and very cute. I mean, I would totally use this place if my pet died, because it doesn't seem to have any negative effects. Which I guess would explain why the neighbor took Louis there, because otherwise that would have been kind of a shitty thing to do. But then the neighbor goes, wait, when they come back, they don't come back the same. And I didn't tell you this, even though I should have. And I didn't ask you if you wanted an evil, demonic cat sleeping in the same room as your child. I'm totally a good guy. Yeah. So Louis tries to get rid of Church. I'm still not sure why, because the cat hasn't really done anything aside from defending itself from stupid children. But okay, he tries to kill him with an injection first, but he can't do it because the cat makes kitty eyes at him. So instead he drives him some distance away from the house and just leaves him there and goes back home. Because I totally would not expect my undead cat, my supernatural undead cat, to come back from that. So of course Church comes back on Ellie's birthday, and we're sort of supposed to think that he's responsible for what happens next. But I think if your 10-year child is dumb enough to be sitting there and petting a cat in the middle of a dangerous road for like 5 minutes, you really can't blame it on the cat what happens next. So obviously a truck shows up and hits Ellie and kills her, and everyone is really sad, and you can imagine what happens next. So while his wife and son are away visiting Rachel's parents, Louis of course decides to resurrect Ellie. But by the way, remember Gage, the toddler? He was actually originally supposed to be the one to die according to the book. But of course it's a little bit difficult to direct a 2-year-old to act like a serial killer, or is it? I don't know. But anyway, the old movie kind of solved that problem by using a really horrible CGI baby. And this movie does something different. So this movie replaces a bad special effect of a 2-year-old with a badly acting 10-year-old, which completely solves the problem. So Ellie comes back, and the only difference seems to be that she now looks like she has only just read the rest of the script of this movie. She kind of has this permanent meh expression on her face, and by the way, the back of her head is stapled together. And it's really nice to know that this forest-dwelling Native American demon creature uses staples. That's really original, I have to admit. Rachel and Gage come back to check on Louis, and Rachel discovers that she now has a really scary zombie daughter, and she is appropriately terrified. But instead of getting in the car with her young, innocent son and getting the hell out of there, she takes her son and goes upstairs. Because nothing bad ever happens in a horror movie when you go upstairs. The climax of the movie flows so well and is filled with so many logical choices from the main characters. At some point, Ellie kills the neighbor, and Louis's reaction when he finds out is kind of like the reaction you'd have if you found out that your cat pooped on the carpet. He's kind of just like, oh shit. And then Ellie starts trying to kill her mother, which I guess is really scary, except that these are like the least scary zombies ever. All you have to do in order to kill them is to actually just kill them. Like, they die like normal people and animals. They don't seem to have any supernatural powers whatsoever, or at least not from what we're seeing in the movie. So I'm not quite sure why a fully grown woman can't deal with a tiny 10-year-old, especially if she has to think about protecting her other living child. At one point, Rachel barricades herself and Gage in the bathroom while Ellie's trying to come in, and instead of kind of pushing back to make sure that the zombie doesn't get into the room, or barricading the door better, or just grabbing something heavy and just whacking her over the head when she does come in, Rachel instead decides to take her baby and throw it out the window to his father, who has now arrived outside, because that is great parenting decision. And meanwhile, she of course hasn't been paying attention to Ellie, so Ellie gets into the room and stabs her. The next perfectly logical decision comes from Louis, who upon catching his son doesn't get in the car and drive off with him, but instead puts him in the car, closes the door and tells this 2-year-old child, "Don't open the door!" Because that's, once again, amazing parenting. And I mean, I guess this movie teaches us that children aren't really a priority, and the only thing you have to protect them from at all costs is telling them that their pet is dead. Murdering zombies, not so much. So Louis then rushes into the house and finds Rachel, who is bleeding on the floor, and of course he kneels down next to her and focuses all of his attention on her, even though he surely knows that his rampaging zombie daughter is going to show up behind him any second. And of course she does. And she knocks him out but doesn't kill him, which at first I thought was really stupid, but actually it's really clever because she already has to drag her mother's body all the way across the woods to the weird Native American cemetery burial ground place. So it's actually very clever of her, because this way her father is gonna get himself half of the way there and she doesn't have to drag him. So Louis wakes up at one point, and once again, instead of just running to the car and driving away with his son, who is still waiting in the car, he instead decides to follow Ellie. So he follows her to the pet cemetery and he actually tries to kill her, but just before he manages to do that, he's killed himself by Rachel, who is now zombified. And the movie ends with the entire zombie family, complete with cat, coming for the little toddler in the car after setting their house on fire. Why they're setting the house on fire, I'm not quite sure. So in conclusion, this movie was amazing. The characters were really original, the acting was great, the zombies were very, very scary, and everything made perfect sense. Go see it. No, seriously, go see it. It's hilarious.